Welcome to Construct Tech TV, and I'm Peggy Smedley. This episode is all about productivity in the construction industry, and we've all heard it many times before. Productivity is lagging in construction. And I will certainly address this issue with some of my guests today. But first, let's address productivity as it relates to infrastructure in construction. To preface the conversation, let me define infrastructure for you. Now, I won't dive too deep into the discussion or define it so much here in this episode because we already did that back in episode 23. But I want to make sure we're all clear here on what infrastructure is. Infrastructure is not just about roads and bridges. Infrastructure encompasses everything from our energy grids to our smart hospitals to our water systems. Infrastructure is the very fabric of our country and our economy. And there are industry trends happening right now that are driving the growth, including increasing urbanization, shifts in national economic growth, and the ability of big data and advances in artificial intelligence. And there's so many others, but these are just a few of them. Taking a deeper dive reveals there is a direct correlation between infrastructure, labor, productivity, and technology that we need to recognize and even discuss. Now let me kind of connect the dots. We have heard, or you've actually heard me say time and time again, that we are experiencing a skilled labor shortage. The Future of Jobs survey from the World Economic Forum kind of gives a pretty good insight into what's going on as it correlates to infrastructure. It shows there are big factors that determine jobs, decisions specifically in infrastructure. The first is labor cost, the second is talent availability, the third is production cost. Skilled local talent is one of the top priorities on infrastructure projects today. The industry needs to find a way to expand task-specialized contractors. It also needs to determine how to grow the workforce with the help of automation. This is where reskilling and technology adoption come into play. The job study shows that the top technology adoption in infrastructure will be new materials, the Internet of Things, IoT, that we talk about all the time. And again, we can't stress this point enough. Cloud computing, and if you are working in infrastructure, these are the areas where you must be innovating. We need to leverage the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. This is coming to power our infrastructure. You must adopt technologies to boost our productivity. And we need to look at technologies that augment how we work. Not necessarily replace what we are doing. We need solutions to augment our workload. These are the ways and the things that we're going to do and look at. And of course, there are going to be some hurdles that stand in our way. The skills gap is perhaps the biggest one, both with laborers and with leadership. We need to focus on reskilling our workers today. We also have a shortage of investment in capital. We need to find ways to generate funding. We need to make greater investments now and well into the future. But perhaps most important, when it comes to building our infrastructure, we need to have an open discussion around labor productivity and technology. Once we open our minds and our pocketbooks, who knows, amazing things just might begin to happen. McKinsey Company has famously said that the construction industry has only averaged 1% of labor productivity growth a year during the past 2 decades. This is in comparison to the growth of 2.8% for the total world economy and 3.6% for manufacturing. How can construction combat this? What role does the construction technology overall play? Here to talk with me all about it today is Tim McManus, Vice President of Major Projects at McKinsey Company. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Peggy. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Tim, let's talk about productivity in the construction industry. I'd love to talk about some of the opportunities and some of the challenges.
Yeah, challenges is a good word, Peggy, because if you look from the middle of the 20th century, productivity for every major industry in the United States has improved, and in some cases improved significantly, like in the case of manufacturing or retail or banking. But if you look at the construction industry, it's been stagnant ever since the 1940s and 1950s. And that's caused by a lot of different challenges in the industry. Number one, it's a very fragmented industry, as you know. Construction has many suppliers, subcontractors, designers, consultants, inspectors. So you have a lot of different parties, all with different interests and different motivations. You have different contracting strategies that have impacted that. You have a very untrained and unskilled workforce for the most part, because there's been very little investment in terms of capability building. If you go state by state, the procurement or the contracting regulations vary from state to state as far as what they allow, what they don't allow, in terms of design bid build or design build or construction management or things like that. So that varies. If you go to a bank today, Peggy, a bank looks totally different than it did 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. If you go to a construction workforce now or a work site, it looks the same as 30 or 40 years ago.
But when you say that, though, part of what I think happens there is we're talking about construction has been somewhat reluctant to use technology. Is that part of the reason? I think if we embrace technology more, I think we're getting better. When we talk about drones and BIM that you mentioned, I think digitization would really help in some of that gap that you describe in productivity, maybe some of the challenges. And you just talked about the skills gap. That's something else we need to address.
Well, that's a great point. You know, when 2017, the McKinsey Global Institute and our construction practice, we developed a paper called Reinventing Construction that looked at the productivity challenge. And in there, we looked at what are the measures that are driving productivity improvement, and we identified 7 of them. And the biggest contributor that we felt that could improve productivity clearly was in the area of digital advancement and technology. That would have the greatest impact. But if you look at the construction industry overall, construction is the least invested in digital and technology, lowest level of investment in R&D, because if you look at the margins of engineering or construction companies, the margins are so thin that companies have been very wary about making major investments in technology over the years. Now, when you see companies like Bechtel or Skanska or Turner or Kiewit or Fluor who are making those investments as first movers, they're seeing significant productivity gains in a very quick way because of that.
You described some things in manufacturing, financial services. Do you think there's some opportunities, and did your research at all maybe show this, maybe in a very unique way, or maybe you didn't look at it, but that construction can learn from the lessons of other industries on the way they've kind of narrowed the gap or the productivity gains, so to speak, from the challenges and the rewards on how they apply technology or how they do things? It seems to me that there's a lot to be learned from what other industries are doing.
No, that's a really good point. If you look at manufacturing as a great example, manufacturing has seen a great gain in productivity over the last several decades because of their methodology. So in construction, we're seeing a lot more movement towards off-site fabrication or prefabrication, modularization, in order to improve that and make those processes a much more effective process. We see the use of robotics in construction. You mentioned drones before. If you look at things such as bridge inspections that used to be done in a very manual way, which would take weeks at a time, drones are now doing bridge inspections in a matter of hours as opposed to weeks. If you look at the use of advanced analytics in construction to look at customer preferences, advances, risks, how do you take that information and apply it going forward? That utilization has greatly enhanced the ability to make projects much more effective, much shorter, and much more economical.
So, Tim, we've talked about these things that are positive, that can help grow the industry. Why are we not seeing greater advances then in construction? If we know what they can do, why aren't we seeing them do it?
Well, I think in some cases we are seeing it. I think it's very slow to move. But as I said before, if you look at major construction companies, their profit margins are less than 5% for the most part. So it takes a real willingness and a real visionary to make that investment when you have very slim margins to do that. I think that's one big change. But I think on the other side, Peggy, to look at the trend, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've analyzed the investment in technology companies for construction, and we've seen approximately $18 billion of investment into these types of companies. So we're seeing in a very short period of time that trend is changing. So I think over the next 1, 2, 3 years, you'll see those advancements coming through, not just with the major contractors or major engineering companies, as I mentioned, but with the mid-size and smaller companies as well.
We've seen construction have dramatic downturns, and there's been some talk that we could be heading for another one in the next 12 to 18 months. Are any of your research indicating that that's a possibility if we don't make the right moves because margins are so thin?
No, I think we're seeing just the opposite. Right now, if you look in 2018, total global construction spending was about $11 trillion. That represents about 13% of global GDP. We also see the need, as American Society of Civil Engineers has shown and others have shown, that in order to stay up with economic growth, forecasted economic growth, that level of construction spending has got to increase as we go forward, just to stay even with forecasted economic growth. So we're very bullish on the fact that we think the construction industry will continue to advance in a very significant way.
Does that have to be if we continue to invest in infrastructure, that's where that bullish growth is coming from?
Infrastructure is certainly one of the drivers, but oil and gas, energy projects, all sorts of different projects, but infrastructure throughout the United States. If you look at America's level of infrastructure as reported by ASCE, it's in a very poor condition throughout the entire country. So that level of investment or reinvestment by each of the states and the federal government has got to increase in order to just drive and keep up with economic growth.
So, Tim, you're actually painting a very positive picture. If the construction industry continues to look at the positive ways of moving forward, you're seeing that productivity is actually going to increase if we do all the right things, and the challenges are actually not so much challenges as opportunities going forward.
Well, I totally agree, but I think the smart companies that we've seen over the last couple of years are making those investments, and it takes those investments at a critical level relative to technology. We're seeing companies that have gotten the understanding that this is not just an IT issue. This is a technology drive to come up with a digital strategy for a company, has got to be driven at a CEO level. It's got to have the investment in skills training and workforce development. It requires that strategy across the board, and it's got to be supported at a very robust level as far as investment goes. And I think the ones that have done that, as I said, those first movers are seeing the results of that in a very significant way. I think it's also a generational issue, Peggy. I think if you look at companies that have been in business, they've been driven and led by generations that did not grow up with technology. And if you look at companies now and that next generation that's taken over the leadership, they're very comfortable. They understand that solution. They're making those investments because they see the benefits of it to come.
So exciting things are looking to happen is what you're saying. So if we keep thinking about what we can do, there's a great opportunity for the future. Tim McManus, Vice President of Major Projects at McKinsey & Company, thank you for your time today.
Peggy, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
The Construction Industry Institute is a research component of the University of Texas in Austin, with the purpose of improving the competitive position of the U.S. business in the global market. The current research projects are focused on the performance and productivity of capital projects in most sectors. Here to talk with me all about it today is Stephen Mulva, Director of the Construction Industry Institute. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, Stephen, do you think the construction industry has a productivity problem?
In a way, yes. I would say that more than a productivity problem, though, we have a production problem. And if I could explain just real quickly, normally we don't really question the methods of production. So if you think about digging a trench, You could get 100 people with shovels and wheelbarrows, and productivity would say, well, why don't we just try to make them work, 10% more of the time? And without really questioning that method of production, saying using a hydraulic excavator, you could make more production in a given amount of time. So we're here at the University of Texas at the Construction Industry Institute. We're pretty concerned with not just productivity, but also the production method.
But looking at production method, are we kind of looking at research that you've done on safety and output, or is there a whole host of things that you really have to look at when it comes to performance, production, and all the things that you have to look at when we're talking about the construction industry?
You have to look at all of those things, but the things that the construction industry likes to manage, cost, schedule, safety, quality, I always say that those are sort of second order effects, that you get good cost or you get good safety if you have a fit for purpose production method. So CII has been around for 35 years, and we've always been concerned with safety and productivity. That's where we got our start. But we've done a lot of research on the production methods themselves. For example, we have one that's called planning for modularization. And we know that the least productive place to be is out in the field. When you're out in the snow and the rain and the dust and the heat, it's not as productive as a fab yard, and definitely not as productive as a manufacturing site where you have climate control and those kinds of things. And so the challenge moving forward is, can you move a lot of the production into a more controlled environment, and especially where you can work at grade, or you can have tables and you have the machinery necessary to be more productive. That's really questioning that method of production.
So are you then saying is the new production methods we're talking about a benefit or a problem when we look at the big scheme of what construction is all about?
It's actually a net benefit. One of the other big things besides productivity the construction industry talks a lot about lately is workforce and workforce development, that especially in the developed world, we literally can't find the certified or the craft professionals that we need. They're in scarce supply. We definitely do not have a problem, though, finding workers to work in a manufacturing environment. I think part of that's demographically related. Families where both parents are working, they're a construction worker, that family is less apt to move around the country. And so they want to stay in one location. And that obviously that benefits a more manufacturing or fab yard centric approach to construction. So we have to figure out, how can we move more of the work, take it out of the field and put it in a manufacturing environment or a fab type environment.
Does that also give for a more controlled hours of a workday versus what is in those elements you described, that you can actually give different types of workers, male, female, older, younger, different type of worker when you're talking about a fabbed environment, prefabbed environment in general?
I think it opens the door as you do more pre-assembly, prefabrication, more in a manufactured or a fab yard setting. You definitely open yourself up to a much more diverse workforce. You have more access to things like gantry cranes, and so the physical demands of construction aren't quite as severe when you get into a more manufacturing or fab yard environment. I think that also prolongs the career of the traditional, stereotypically, the male, a male worker, they can prolong their career. We know that some of the crafts, the average age that they leave the workforce is in the mid-50s. And I think as you move the work out of the field, we might be able to get an extra 10 years out of some of these people.
Construction is an industry right now that can't afford to lose 2 million or can't find 2 million workers is what we're talking about right now.
Right. I think it's some of both. Just the physical demands of it and being outside for, a career that stretches for 3 or 4 decades definitely can take its toll. People's knees wear out, other things. So we're looking for ways to reduce the physical demands of the job, but also just not moving them around as much. And I think all of those things will play a factor into solving this productivity problem.
What is the future outlook for construction? I think if we look at it, we have less than 9% of women in the industry overall. I think in general, we have a younger generation that's not looking to construction, and we have to try to get more of the younger generation interested. But productivity in general, if we go to technology to improve that, there's less jobs in general. We look at artificial intelligence, having to work side by side. What is the overall outlook going to look like for construction as we move forward?
I think the key to it is going to be technology. We have the design tools already, the digital twin, the 3D models. We leverage that, and we've led the effort on the research side for something we call advanced work packaging. It's CI's newest best practice, but it's really going from that digital environment and those models and determining how do we do the production of the construction project? What's the role of the suppliers and the manufacturing and the fab yards? I think as we extend that even further, we get into work instructions, we make the tasks of construction incredibly more efficient. And I think that's actually going to bring a lot of people, as technology evolves, it will bring more and more people into it. We recently had a company come out with it's called SAM, it's an automated bricklaying device. And what was more striking than even the technology itself was that there was a bricklaying crew of masons, and they were all in their 20s. And they said, this is really cool, this is great. This isn't old school construction like you'd see in movies from long ago. We're working with technology. It's doing the parts of the job that we don't really like doing all that well, to let us focus on the parts that we do, the more intricate parts that the robot wasn't necessarily as good at. And I think it's that hybrid approach to using technology, using the advanced work packaging, will bring a different class and a diverse workforce back into our industry.
Looking forward right now, are you seeing a new vibrant industry emerging? I mean, is CII helping to spark this new workforce of the future for productivity purposes?
I think so. The companies that we have as CII members, they're some of the leading companies. They're extremely excited about it. We've had Caterpillar come in and talk to us about even a workerless job site that in some cases, the earth moving operations, you can think about stretches of a interstate highway, can be done basically without any equipment operators. The equipment, the technology has evolved to the point where it's connected to satellites, it's grading the roads, it's doing the pavement operations. It's an incredibly safer operation, and as I said, this is cool technology that's drawing people into the industry. I don't think overall we're going to return to the same numbers of construction workers that we've had in the past, but I think the tasks that they're doing are evolving. We're going to need more people who understand the technology and can basically repair equipment, program equipment, reboot it so that it can continue to work effectively and basically work 24 hours a day.
Stephen Mulva, Director of the Construction Industry Institute, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Productivity is a vital component to construction, and we've been talking about how we can do so much more in the industry. And I've asked Kristina Swallow to continue our conversation, and she's been gracious enough to stay with us. So, Kristina, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kristina, let's talk a little bit more about what we can do with productivity and talking about the construction industry. And I'd love to get your take when we've been talking about the various states and how they've been improving their report cards just recently as each state releases them. I'd love to get your take on what each state might be able to do to improve productivity within their infrastructures individually, maybe what the governors are doing, what their politicians, and we've been talking about as we ended our last segment, the last time we talked about how we need to take an active role. What does that mean for the construction industry overall to grow and improve what we want to do?
Well, as we've discussed, we have limited resources. I didn't go deep into how limited they are, but we basically have to almost double our investment in infrastructure between now and 2025 to bring our grades up, right? So with limited resources, we have to make sure that we're using every single dollar we have as efficiently as possible. So increasing productivity is important, and we're starting to see areas, and we have a labor shortage. We have a labor shortage, so we also have to figure out how we can best tackle our infrastructure given a money and a labor shortage. And so some of the things that we're starting to see is on the front end in the design, where we are using our engineering design capabilities and the software capabilities that we have to reduce the risk of construction and reduce the uncertainty, so that once construction starts, it can move forward without stopping. That's a huge area that we can improve on, and it's something that's continuing to be developed.
We talk about we are going to have a lot of construction projects going on right now, that we have a construction boom right now. But at the same time, we have to be fearful of where we have these spikes, there's a downturn. So at the same time, we have this boom in construction, but you just talked, we don't have the labor. So we have to be fearful that while we have this great uptick in construction, we understand that we look at what the talent crisis means, because we all talk about, well, there's going to be AI and they're going to be working side by side. We as an industry have to understand what productivity means overall in the growth and the downturn. Are we looking at this because of the infrastructure crisis we're facing? There's kind of this yin and this yang kind of going on in an industry that is so critical to everything we do in the GDP overall.
It's interesting because you're the concept of being concerned about a downturn. And it's real. I live in Las Vegas, right? So Las Vegas was one of the worst hit, if not the worst hit, during the most recent downturn. So yes, the concept of an infrastructure downturn is something we need to be well aware of. But at the same time, our grades on our infrastructure are a D+. If the funding is available, we can continue to build infrastructure. There's no reason to have an infrastructure downturn, a construction downturn, if the funding is available. And I always tell anybody who's interested in joining in the industry that there will always be work for you. You may have to move, but there will always be work for you if you're in this industry, because our public needs our water systems, we need our roads, we need our bridges. So one of the things that we need to start looking at is, how do we develop a skilled labor development program? That's part of it, right? We need to find ways that we can bring more people into the profession. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the civil engineer or the project manager or the project super. There has to be a path that we communicate to our sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, that you can come into this industry, make a very good life, have a very good quality of life with your family, and help build the future.
Have we done that? It's something that I'm very passionate about, that we have not showed the next generation how exciting this industry is. It is not this dirty job. It's not something you have to have long hours. There's prefab now. There's a way of using technology in ways that we still don't even know how we're going to use technology on the job site. It's evolving so rapidly, but even in ways now, we're building things in unique ways that are exciting and shaping. We never even thought of drones on a job site a few years ago to the way we're using them now.
Peggy, have you seen our movie Dream Big?
Yes.
Isn't it incredible?
Yes, it's very exciting.
Yeah, so that's one way that ASCE has stepped up and said, we need to tell a different story. We need to tell a better story. And so we have this 3D IMAX film, Dream Big, that's geared towards the builders of our infrastructure tomorrow. And it shows how innovation and technology can help us build a better tomorrow. We need to do more of that.
Do you think if we, one of the things I've noticed the construction industry is doing is we talk about what we could do and sometimes we're not doing it all together. Do you think, again, as we show more and more daughters and sons together what we can do, instead of trying to fight this fight independently, like with that Dream Big, more of us have to see we can do things as an industry instead of separately?
I think that's important. When you talk about engineers, there's so many, right? Like, I can come up off the top of my head with 4 or 5: civil, like mechanical, chemical, industrial, computer, right? There's systems, there's so many. And yet, in order to achieve the society we want to see tomorrow, we are going to have to start working across our silos. We are already working together more, and we need to continue that. You know, the next generation of pavement, I don't know what that's going to be, but it's not probably going to be exclusively civil engineers developing. It'll be civil and chemical, and maybe some systems engineers, right? What else? Environmental engineers. You know, one of the things that I thought was really cool is I recently heard that the state of California was having a challenge with their rubber tires, right? With used tires and their landfill space that they were taking. So they actually provided an incentive program to use rubberized asphalt. So rubberized asphalt's been around for a really long time, but California created an incentive program to use it and make it more equitable. So we're going to have to start thinking about systems, right? We can't just think about what do I have now. It's what could I use, how could I use it, and how can I achieve the outcomes with the limited resources and the limited labor that I have, right? How can I achieve what I need to do? We need to think about our problems bigger.
Well, that's like building a building. Why do we always use steel and concrete? Maybe there's a new form to build the next building, right? There's always some new material we haven't thought of. Yeah. And, you know, cigarette butts to build roads. We never thought we'd ever use that. Look what's happening. Yeah. Kristina Swallow, past president of ASCE, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Peggy.
All right, well, you can see we're only limited by our imaginations. And in construction, we're always building, and you can always see that in Las Vegas, right? There's always something new and exciting. All right, thank you for joining us. We've got more to come. I wanted to wrap up today's show by giving you some tangible tips for boosting productivity on infrastructure construction projects. Perhaps it goes without saying, but implement technology. There is a direct correlation between productivity growth and technology adoption, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. The Construction Industry Institute even says adoption of proven technology can improve construction industry productivity by as much as 30 to 45%. This is a huge increase that we so desperately need. But there is also a flip side that we need to be aware of. New technologies can create positive disruption to our business processes, but it takes time for people to learn new skills. We need to consider all of this when we make a big change. Add to the equation that technology is advancing faster than ever before. It can become challenging to continue to implement new technologies, all while keeping productivity processes in place. So make sure you aren't implementing technology just for the sake of new technology. Rather, create a strategic approach that will have a positive impact on both the bottom line and overall productivity. My second tip is to focus on safety. We all know that in construction that safety incidents are the primary reason projects stall. The Liberty Mutual Workplace Safety Index shows that in 2018, workplace injuries soared to nearly $60 billion in direct U.S. workers' compensation costs. Businesses are spending more than $1 billion a week in injuries. Sadly, that doesn't even factor in lost time. The average cost for a lost time workplace injury is $7,500. Yes, $7,500. Strong safety programs can help. Finally, leverage the data you already have to recognize trends in productivity. Workers typically spend less than half of their time on their direct responsibilities, and there is a number of reasons for this. A Salary.com survey reveals some of the top workplace distractions are having too many meetings, dealing with office politics, fixing other people's mistakes in the office, even on the job site, and coping with coworkers' busy work and dealing with an abundance of emails. No surprise there. The bottom line is recognizing where the time goes and identifying ways to boost productivity in the office and at the job site. All of this means when we increase productivity, we are improving our ability to build a stronger tomorrow, today. And thanks for watching Construct Tech TV, your fierce advocates for construction.